Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish, and once again we get to spend time together talking about things that we love to do with needle and thread. So today I want to remember to ask you to subscribe, and if you hit that little bell icon, then you get notifications and you'll never miss an episode, which pleases me and I hope will please you too. So the first thing I want to talk about is that I'm going to be teaching at the Cupboard in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in January. I have classes planned for 3 days, kind of toward the end of the month. It's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the dates are, this is why I have to write things down. It's January 26th, 27th, and 28th. So that's a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now the Cupboard is very conveniently located in Fort Lauderdale. These are going to be very small classes. Just going to do them right there in the shop. Lots of individual attention. And there are 3 different classes that I'm going to be teaching. I don't know which days Karen, the owner, is going to schedule them. So call the shop and ask for the details as far as prices and hours, etc. 2 needlepoint classes and a class on how to make twisted cord. Now, this class for the twisted cord is not just about how to physically make the cord, but it's also an exercise in playing with different types of threads and different weights of cords, and you'll create your own sort of sample library so that weeks or months later, you could go back and say, I want a cord about this thickness. And you could go back and look at your sample and know exactly how you made it. So that's a big feature of this class. We're going to make 1 color, 2 color, 3 color, and 4 color twisted cord. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun. And then the other 2 classes are needlepoint classes. Even though I label these as needlepoint classes, these are classes which may interest you even if all you do is count a cross stitch. If you are the slightest bit interested in crossing that line and applying some of the same skills you've already learned in count a cross stitch to needlepoint, these are good classes for you. So in both cases, you're going to be able to pick your own color scheme. So what I'm showing you here is just a sampling. This is what I call square within a square. And we're going to learn a variety of stitches. And this one is done in my favorite thread called Silk and Ivory. And then the little bit, I don't know if you can see that little bit of glimmer, a flat braid that's used for accent. So that's one class called Square Within a Square. And this is the same concept, just with not using any of the shiny threads and using a completely different color scheme. So whether you want to do something sort of serious or something whimsical, something traditional, something dramatic, that's completely up to you. I do encourage people to bring any sort of a sample that helps inspire them. It can be a man's tie, it can be a scarf, it can be a piece of pottery. Anything that's got color in it that you say to yourself, I like those colors, and that's something I'd like to do in this class. So this is called Square Within a Square. And then another one of my favorite things to teach is Bargello. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Bargello. We're going to learn the basics of how to do it. This is one particular pattern that you can do. There's an infinite number of ways that you can use Bargello. Now, if you're a fan of Wake Forest University, you'll recognize the colors here. Happens to be that Wake Forest is located right here in my hometown in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So that's why I made this sample. So you can pick school colors. You can do something that goes with your decor. There's just so many things that you can do with Bargello. And we'll talk a little bit about color theory. And just like the other class, you'll be encouraged to pick out your own color scheme. And yeah, so I love teaching beginners, and I love teaching these very traditional ways to do needlepoint. So again, if you have been doing needlepoint but have never done Bargello or some of these stitches that I introduce in Square Within a Square, these will be good classes for you. And if you have never done needlepoint at all, I want to encourage you to just jump in and take either one of these classes. I don't happen to believe that you have to master certain stitches in order to go on to other stitches. If you can thread a needle and if you can follow directions, then I can teach you either one of these projects. So that's at the Cupboard in Fort Lauderdale. I have been having so much fun with the sampler stitched by sweet Emily Sarah Amelia Vanderpant back in 1827. So I am still busy charting this one out, but I have picked the colors and I am so excited to show them to you. Now, in picking these colors, I used the back of the sampler to match these so that we're looking at the colors that are the least faded or affected by sunlight and time. There's a really interesting range of greens in this sampler. The big bright colors on this one are down here in these little strawberries, and then some very rich browns and creams. So this is just going to be a lot of fun to reproduce this sampler. But as I mentioned some time ago, I want to also take this very sort of serious and very traditional color scheme and brighten it up and make my second reimagined sampler. Now, I did this with Roxana Corson and called it Roxy. And so I'm planning on a similar thing with Miss Emily. Now, this one does not offer as many opportunities to introduce other types of stitches that I was able to do on Roxy. But I'm going to figure out where I can do a little bit of magic. And that's going to make this a little more... I don't know how to use, what term to use. A little more fun, interesting. Now, you'll also be able to stitch it entirely in cross stitch. Although Miss Emily stitched a good bit of this over one, I'm going to figure out a way to also chart it so that it can completely be done over two, so that my Aida stitchers will still be able to do some version of this. But let me show you the bright colors. So a completely different color scheme here. Going with a little bit more feminine. Again, when I started doing this for changing Roxana to Roxy, my thought process was, if this young girl had the choice of colors available to her that we have available today, would 8-year-old Emily have chosen these colors? Or would she have said, "Ooh, I like these pinks and blues and purples"? So what I have done here is, this is kind of the full palette. I don't really expect to use all of these colors when I do the reimagined version, but my general philosophy is I start with more colors than I think I'm going to use and whittle it down to what is going to work for the sampler. I find in my 40 plus years of experience designing that that's a much better option than to start with fewer colors and then later on say, I'd like to add a darker green or a lighter pink, and then you go and you find that there really isn't one. And this way, starting out with the full range, then it's a whole lot easier. The other thing I'm really excited about is that there are some new colors in the Cosmo line. There's a new, deeper color that's going to go right in here. So I can't wait to get that on order. So that's Emily and Emmie's update. The other thing I will tell you is that I am planning a stitch along for these two young ladies. And I'll have more information about that later. But I think it will be starting somewhere like in the middle of 2023. So you've got plenty of time to sign up for it. I just want to kind of put it out there so you can start thinking about what stitch-alongs you want to do in this next year. And speaking of which, don't forget that you've got your stitch-along tracker and your joy planner, and that's a good way to like really focus in on what you want to do. If you follow me on Facebook, you saw a post earlier this week that showed some projects I've been working on for the last couple of months, actually. And I can finally have them finished and can show off a little bit. Everybody loves crossing that finish line and saying, not only am I done stitching, but I am fully finished with this project. So these are projects for classes I plan to teach in 2023. Now I showed you a little bit of the concept of this one back when I did the little episode at the quilt shop. I had a paper sample of just the concept of what I wanted to do. I had not started stitching it yet. So this is just going to be a whole lot of fun, learning how to put it together and do this kind of beaded edging. And this is the back of it. So you'll have a place for the date and a place for your initials. And then scissors just get anchored by this ribbon right here. So now the scissors are not included in the class kit. These are like my favorite scissors. These are from Wright and made in the UK. I love traditional stork scissors. So that's one class. And then using the same sampler border, I'm also made this as a really functional sachet. It could be a lot of different things. Whoops, might help if I hold it right side up. Has the alphabet on it, and then on the back, a place to put your initials and the date. But the key here for this class is learning to do the very traditional hem stitch. I love doing hem stitch. It is so feminine and dainty, and it really is not hard to do at all. It's mainly just a matter of just knowing how to do it and understanding the steps that you have to take to prepare for it. And then this class is also about how to put this together. So that's another class I'm teaching. And then this is going to be a whole lot of fun. I took the sampler motifs, just coming from my favorite things. And this is a class where the cross stitch is done as pre-work, and the class is how to put it together. And as just kind of a fun addition for those that want to, can put a pocket on the back where a gift card could be slipped inside there. So those are 3 class projects that I've been busy working on, but really couldn't show you until now. Speaking of stitching and working on projects, recently I was having a pedicure, and that's an hour that I really get to just really relax and get some stitching done. Got all my stitching set up, and the spa where I go, there's wonderful lighting, and I was all set up and realized I didn't have a needle. And I've talked about this before, but I now am keeping needles in my pocketbook. And when I buy my needles from John James, I get them in these little paper things. So there's like one needle in each one. So that's going to be really, really easy. Just put a couple of these in my pocketbook and I'll never be without a needle again. It can happen once, but I'm not going to have it happen a second time. That's for sure. Okay, what's next? Let's talk about one of the more common dilemmas I see people post about on Facebook. And it goes something like this. People will show a photo of a piece of fabric and some flosses, assortment over dyes, whatever. And the caption will be something along the lines of, does anybody recognize this fabric and these colors? I bought it for a project, but I don't know what project it's for. And I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but apparently it happens often enough that I see a post every couple weeks or so, it seems. Now, mainly that's because I guess I belong to a lot of groups. So there's lots of opportunities for me to see it. But this is another way to use your project tracker page in your Joy Planner if you decide to get this. So besides using it to write about a project that you've actually started, why not fill this out when you've ordered the things for a particular project? And you can always just, add a Post-it note and write yourself a note on there saying where you ordered it from, the date you ordered it, maybe when you expect it to come. And then when it arrives, you'll know what project it's for. I got a great question from Bethany a couple weeks ago. She wrote and asked me how I keep the sponge from getting funky, and asked if I changed it out periodically. And I realized this is something I really haven't talked about very much. So what we're talking about here is a little container that I keep in my stitching that I use to dampen my floss to prevent knots and tangles. And it's a great question, and it really does take a little bit of maintenance. I find that if I wash it periodically and maybe even put just a couple drops of vinegar in the rinse water, that it keeps it from getting, as Bethany said, funky. You definitely do need to take care of it. So besides just keeping the sponge damp, you also need to keep it clean. And I guess, so to answer the other part of her question, whether or not I replace it, I guess every once in a while it wouldn't hurt, but I go a long time without replacing it, like more than a year. It's really hard to say. But, and these little containers, this is just actually meant for keeping like small amounts of salad dressing or other condiments. You find it, I found these like in Target where they sell containers for food storage and lunch boxes and whatnot, and that's what I use. And the other FAQ that I want to talk about today is a question that, again, I'm seeing more and more often in social media and in online groups about counter cross stitch. And it goes something like this. A person is stitching, say, a cat on white Aida with white background. And the directions call for that white to be stitched. Now, I'm just going to be frank with you here. I don't see any reason whatsoever to stitch the same color on top of a background color for your fabric. This, I think, is like the tail end of that trend for full coverage. And again, I am not knocking full coverage pieces at all. I admire people who stitch them. It's not my cup of tea, but there are certainly hundreds, if not thousands of people that only stitch full coverage. But it's kind of gone to the extreme now where I see people stitching, say, on black Aida, and they're stitching the black background. They're stitching on cream Aida, and they're stitching the cream background. And I'm just here to tell you that it's really not necessary. if that's what somebody wants to do, then that's up to them. Personally, I feel like it's taken the full coverage concept a little too far. Traditionally, in counted thread work, the fabric you're stitching on, what a lot of people refer to as the ground cloth, is one of the design elements. It's part of the design. And as such, it is embraced and becomes a part of the story, not an afterthought, and certainly not something to be covered up. So a little bit of history in that traditionally counted thread work does not cover all the ground cloth, with a little practicality of saying, if it's the same color and it's not going to change the impact of the design, why bother? But with a footnote saying, if that's what you want to do, by all means do it. So that brings me to the end of the day. It is, if you're watching this in real time, we're in that wonderful, crazy, busy time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and a lot of things going on. Travel, gift making, shopping, visiting, and I hope amidst all that you are finding a great deal of things to be joyful about, and build some memories that you can treasure for a long, long time. So between now and next week, stitch happy, stay safe, and I'll see you then.